Hello friends, today I am going to talk about optional argument in C# that was introduced in C# 4.0. We'll see what optional arguments are and how and when to use them in C# program. So before we get started, just a quick reminder to subscribe my channel, hit the red button and don't forget to click on the little bell icon. That way you will be notified every time I upload a new video. Okay, without any further delay, let's get started. Optional argument in C#. What optional arguments are? Optional arguments enables us to omit arguments for some parameters that are defined as optional. It is introduced in C# 4.0. So this technique can be used with methods, indexes, constructors, and delegates. So what does it mean is the definitions of a method, constructor, indexes, or delegate can specify whether its parameters are required or optional. So any call must provide arguments for all required parameters, but can omit arguments for optional parameters. So each optional parameter has a default value as part of its definition. So if no argument is sent for that parameter, default value is going to be used. Before we indulge ourselves deeply, first we understand what parameters and arguments are. Argument versus parameter. So here if you see these method definitions, I have written public static int add int num1, int num2, int num3, and then it is just performing the addition operation and returning the result to it. And if you see num1, num2, num3 are parameters over here. So we can say that a parameter is nothing but a named variable passed into a method. So these are used to import arguments into methods, right? Okay, now if you see the method call where I'm calling this add method in which I'm passing the value 5, 10 and 20, right? So these are nothing but the arguments. So we can say that arguments are the actual values that are passed in when the method is invoked, right? That's what I have written var result add 5, 10, 20. Now we understood what arguments and parameters are. Let's revisit the definitions of the optional arguments. It says that optional argument enables us to omit arguments for some parameters that are defined as optional. So now you must have understood that optional arguments are nothing but the actual value that we can omit for some parameters if those are defined as optional parameters, right? Okay, now let's understand with the help of examples shown over here. So there is a static method add that has three parameters. First two are the required parameters and last one is the optional parameter where I have provided default value 5 to it. That's what I have written int num3 is equal to 5, right? So this method performs the addition operation and returns the result. Now if you see the method call, in call 1 I have written var result is equal to add 5, 10, 20. And this 5, 10, 20 are nothing but the arguments and yellow highlighted 20 value is nothing but the optional argument. So here I have passed the value for the optional argument. Okay. So this addition operation is going to get returned the value as a 35 as a result that I am just depicting over here output as a 35, right? So now if you see this call number 2 where I have written var result is equal to add 510. If you see I have just passed the two arguments over here, right? So in case if you are not passing the odd one which is the optional argument, so in that case what will happen, this num3 is equal to 5, so 5 value is going to get considered as a default value for this num3 because we have not passed anything over here, right? So here basically I have opted not to pass a value for the optional argument, so default value was used in the add method. That's what we got the output as a 20 because 5 plus 10 plus 5 is equal to 20. That's what this output is coming as a 20. Here basically I have opted not to pass a value for the optional argument. So default value is going to get used. Rules for optional argument in C#. Here we are going to discuss the rules associated with the optional arguments. Number 1. Optional parameters are defined at the end of the parameter list after any required parameters. If you see this add method, I have written num1 and num2 as required parameters at first and second position. And after required parameters only, we need to write this optional parameter. And that's what I have written int num3 is equal to 5. And here, whenever we are going to pass this optional parameter, we need to pass this value, default value. And that's what I have written the default value as a 5 to for the num3, right? So this is the rule number 1. Rule number 2 says each optional parameter has a default value as part of its definition. That's what I have given this value 5 to num3, right? If no argument is sent for that parameter, the default value is used. What does it mean is, whenever we are going to call this method add, if you are not passing as an optional argument, in that case this default value 5 is going to be used for this num3 variable, num3 parameter. However, if you use optional attribute from system.runtime.interop services namespace, we don't need to provide the default value for the optional parameter. And if you see this example shown over here, here I have used this optional attribute, and here I have not passed any default value, but system is going to assign the value as a 0 for the default value, and it is going to be decided based on the data type. Just keep in mind, we don't need to provide any default value whenever we are going to use this optional attribute for defining the optional parameter. Number 3, a default value must be one of the following types of the expression. A constant expression, for example 5, 10, 15, like this. Expression of the form new val type, where val type is a value type such as enum or struct. So we can pass this enum value or a struct value as a part of optional parameter default values. Okay. Number 3, an expression of the form default val type, where val type is a value type. So these three expression we can use as a default value. Okay, let's switch to the Visual Studio and see all these things in action. Here we are on Visual Studio. Here we are going to see demo of the optional argument in C#. So first of all, what I have done, I have created one console application named optional argument demo that has program.cs file. In program.cs file, there is a namespace named optional argument demo, in which I have defined this enum orientation, where the none is equal to 0, north is equal to 1, east is equal to 2, south is equal to 3, and west is equal to 4. There are two class named program and class named imply. In class imply, we have private string variable, private string underscore name. And here we have parameterized constructor, where I have passed this optional parameter. That's what I have given this default name to name parameter. Okay, this name is going to get assigned to underscore name, which is nothing but the private string variable over here. Okay, now there is a method print. Print, if you see in this print method, we have three parameters. First one is the required parameter, int age. Second and third one are nothing but the optional parameter. That's what I have provided the value against those. The string hobby is equal to cricket, int experience in here is equal to 5, right? What I'm doing, I'm just printing those things into this console window. First, I'm just writing name, age, hobby, and the experience in here. So these statements are going to get printed in this statement into console window. Now we have another method, print me. If you see this print me method, there are two required parameters, age and hobby. But if you see the third parameter, which I have defined optional parameter, but with the help of the optional attribute. Whenever we are going to create optional parameter with the help of optional attribute, we don't need to provide any default value attached to it. And here also I'm just printing this name, age, hobby, and experience in years. Okay, if you see this print me to method, the first two parameters are the required one, and the third one, which is nothing but the optional parameter. And here the default value we are taking from the enum. So orientation.none, we are going to get it and converting into the int, and that's what we are assigning into this orientation. Now I'm just printing these things into this console window, and that's what I am printing: name, age, hobby, and orientation. Okay, now let me go and show you how we are going to call it. So for that, there is a class named program that has main method, which is an entry point of this application. Here I have just written optional argument demo in C#, because I'm just giving the demo of the optional argument, right? Now what I have done, I have created an instance of this imply class. So I have written imply obj imply 1 is equal to new imply. And if you see, I'm just calling this print method, this print method, where we have one required parameter and two optional parameter. Okay, so here what I'm doing, I'm just calling this print method. I'm passing 25 chess 1 as an arguments, right? And if you see this one value and chase value, we have provided the optional argument value also. So this value is going to get considered instead of the default value. Okay, if you see the second line statement, obj imply 1 print 30 cycling, here I have not passed the third argument, right, which is optional argument. So I just omit it. So in that case, default value is going to get used. Okay, so 30 cycling I have provided as an argument. Then I have called this print method. If you see this next statement, where I have written obj imply 1 dot print 26, here I have just passed one single argument. That value is 26, right? I have not passed second and the third argument, because those are the optional one. If you, even though we are not providing those value, default values are going to get used. But if you try to write like this, obj imply dot print, and because this print method, the first parameter is the required parameter, right? Int age, this is the required parameter. So if you try to write like this, it is just going to give me the error. What error it says? It says there is no argument given that correspond to the required formal parameter age of the imply print method. It is just complaining at the compile time itself we are going to get this error. So what we need to do, I just need to comment this part. I just wanted to show you, because the required parameter, if it is mentioned in the method, we need to pass as an argument. As we are not passing, it is just going to give the error. That's what error I have shown you. Okay, so this is the first block of imply one. Now if you see, I have created another instance of this imply class. For that I have written imply obj imply 2 is equal to new imply James. And if you see here, I have passed James in the constructor. Default value is not going to get used. Instead of that, this passed value, that is the James argument value, is going to get used. In first statement, I have passed all three parameters, 30, football, 1, 35, and in the second statement I have passed only two parameters, 35 and watching movie. In the third statement I have passed only single one argument. Okay, that is the 25. If you see this statement, if you hover it, it is saying the argument missing, because there is no argument I have passed at the second position. So it is complaining, even though the second argument is the optional argument, we cannot write like this. So that is the error. So we need to comment this. Now, if you see this one, I want to pass the first argument and the third argument. I'm not mentioning the second argument. But here, if you write like this, system will understand that is the first and second argument you have passed. But I wanted to pass the third argument, right? So if you see here, it is just saying this cannot convert into a string. Why it is saying? Because the second parameter in this method, it belongs to the string category. Okay, but here I am passing int. That's what it is complaining, cannot convert from into a string. But in reality, I want to pass the third parameter, right? But we cannot write like this. So what is the way for that? We can do so with the help of the named parameter. So if you see this statement, I have passed the first argument and the third argument. But when we are passing the third argument, we are using this named argument over here. So experience in year colon 10. So this way we can pass the third argument. Okay. And we can omit the second one. So second one will be considered as a default one, whatever the method has the default value. Okay. Now if you see this block, so here what I'm doing, I'm just calling a method that has optional attribute. Okay. If you see this print me method, here I have defined this optional parameter with the help of optional attribute, and I have not passed any default value. If there is no default value, because this is the optional, so in that case I have written obj imply dot print me 30 football 1. So I have passed all three arguments. In the second statement, I have passed two arguments, 35 watching value. The third argument I have not, because that one is the optional argument and we can omit that, and that's what I have not written. Here also I have written 25 and dancing, right? Two arguments. Okay, now if you see this code block, okay, so here what I am doing, I am just printing this statement using optional default value from enum val type, because I am just going to show the demo how we can use the default value for the enum for the optional parameters, right? So for that, what I have done, I have created an imply class. Here I have passed this Akanksha value to constructor. So this default name is not going to get considered. Instead of that, name is equal to Akanksha will be considered, what we are passing over here. Okay, once this object get created, I am just going to call this print me to method. So here I have passed 35 watching web series, and then orientation dot not. Orientation is nothing but the enum, and I am taking the consideration of this north value. The north is going to be considered as a 1, so I'm just converting into int, because this print to method as a third optional parameter here, it is of the int category, so we need to convert it into int so that it will be considered for this, right? So once we call this, it is just going to be called this print to method. It is going to print this all this information. So now you have understood this program. Let me execute this and show the output to you. Okay, so output got appear into this console window. Optional argument demo in C sharp got printed. Default name is 25, hobby, chase, experience 1 year, 5 year, 5 year got printed. If you compare with a statement that we have written over here, so if you see this first statement, right? So here age 25, hobby, chase, and experience is equal to 1 year got printed because I have passed 25, chase, and 1 over. This first statement got printed, right? This one. Now, if you see the second line, 30 cycling. So it got 30 and cycling. But if you see, I have not passed the experience, but it got 5 years. How? Because the optional parameter is having the default value here, right? This default value, experience in year is equal to 5, right? So that got considered and then it got printed experience 5 years. It goes for the similarly it goes for the this third statement 26. So age 26, hobby is equal to cricket, experience is equal to 5 year, because cricket, again, this is the optional parameter in this method, so default value got considered and then it got printed over here, right? If you see this default value, I have mentioned cricket, and that's what this cricket value got appeared, and experience also taken from this default value itself for this experience in year optional parameter, right? Now if you see this this statement, there it is. Now if you see this statement imply 2, so here I have passed James. See, all this obj imply 2 is get considered as a James value, because this default name is not going to consider whatever the I have passed this value to the constructor while creating this imply class. That value is going to get considered, and that's what this name we are, whenever we are printing into console.line, that name is going to get considered. That's what this James got considered over here, right? Now if you see what I have done here, I have printed 30 football 1, so it got printed 30 football and 1. I have not passed here 35 watching value, then 5 year got considered. Here also I have just given the single argument, so 25 got considered, cricket and 5 year it got considered from the default value of the optional parameter. Okay, now 25 got considered, cricket experience 50 years. Now if you see, I have used this 30 as a first argument, and then I have mentioned experience in here. The named argument I have considered, and I pass the value to the 10 over here. So if you see, this experience 10 year got considered, and the second argument here, even though I have not passed, it is going to get considered cricket, and that's what this cricket got printed into this console window. Now if you see the third example, calling method with the optional attribute, so here I have passed 30 football 1, so it got printed 30 football 1. Here 35 watching movie, and I have not passed the third argument, so it got considered 0 years, because I have used optional attribute. In optional attributes, we have not provided any default value because we don't need to provide that. So because that is the int category, so automatically is going to consider zero value to it. That's what this 0 year got printed, right? For this Raj. And the third one also 25 dancing, I have not provided the third argument, so again it is going to consider as a 0. Now if you see this using optional default value from enum val type, so here if you notice, I have printed Akanksha. So here, while creating an imply class, I have passed Akanksha value to its constructor. So this statement got printed Akanksha. Here I have passed 35 watching web series, and the north value is 1. That's what it got printed 1 as a third argument. Now if you see 35 cooking, I have not passed the third argument. In that case, what will happen? I have set as a none over here. So it is just going to print as a 0 over here. That's it. Let me tell you one more thing. This is parameterless constructor, right? Let me uncomment this. Now if you see, this is one constructor where there is no parameter. This is one constructor where we have optional parameter, right? When we are going to call imply with no parameter, so in that case this one is going to get invoked. It is not like this, we are not passing, then this default value will be considered. So this will take the higher precedence. Okay, so it will be called, not this imply. Let me tell you how. Now I'm just going to use this same example. Okay, let me go and execute this. Now if you see, output got appear into this console window, and if you see, I have called this imply one class and it is passing 25 chess 1, right? So if you see chess 25 chess 1, it got printed. But if you see this name, it got printed as a Ravi. When we are creating this imply class, this imply parameter less constructor got invoked and this name value set as a Ravi. And that's what this Ravi is going to get printed when we are calling this print method, because this name private variable is having the value as Ravi now, because from this parameter less constructor this got set, right? So that's what it got printed. It's not like that this is the optional parameter, so we are going to get invoked this one. No, it won't be get invoked. So this one will be having the higher precedence, so this value is going to get set, and that's what this name is going to get printed as a Ravi, and that's what this output got appear the same way, right? For all these three statements we are having name as a Ravi, because in the first call itself I have called this imply parameter less constructor, right, for creating this object. That's what this Ravi is set, and then all the print method is printing Ravi name, because in print method we are printing underscore name, and this underscore name is set as Ravi over here in parameter less constructor. Benefits of optional argument in C sharp. Now let's talk about benefits of optional argument. First and most important benefit is it is not necessary to introduce additional overload implementation of the method. We just use optional parameters in method and we are ready to go. Arguments that are not specified when calling this method, in that case default value is to be used. Let's consider this scenario. We have one existing method and different calls are made to this method from various places. And there is a need to add new parameter to this method, but we don't want to disturb all calls were being made to this method. So one way to overcome to this situation is to create an overloaded method where we can add new parameter, and as per the new requirement we can make a call to this newly created method, right? But it will be a repetition of the code. To avoid this, we can add optional parameter to the existing method and we are ready to call this method with the argument. And other calls that were previously being made to this method do not require any change, because even though we are not passing the new argument to those call, we are safe, because this is defined as an optional parameter, and in that case default value is going to get used. Okay, let's understand it with the help of example shown over here. So here what I have done, I have created one add method that is going to accept two input parameters, int num1 and int num2, and both are the required parameters. So basically this method is just performing the addition and returning the result to the caller. Okay, so now if you see this method call where result is equal to add 510, because this method is going to accept only two input parameters, and this call where we have passed required argument, right? 5 and 10 value I have associated with it and then I have passed to it. Okay, so well and good. And such type of call is happening, let's suppose, in multiple places. So we don't want to change this method call each and every places. Okay, but there is a requirement where we need three values to be added. In that case, one way is that we just copy and paste it, created new method and put the extra parameter to it. So basically we are creating one overload method to this add method. Instead of that, we can do optional parameter use in that particular method and we are ready to go. You see, as a part of this change, what I have done, I have added in this add method as a third parameter as an optional parameter, and I have provided this default value 0 to it. Even though this call is being made to this method, we are not going to change this method call. This method call is still fine, because these are the two required parameters and we have already provided this required parameter argument value, right? So 5 and 10 we have already passed to it, so that's okay. And num3 it is just going to consider as a 0. Even though we are adding plus num3, it is not going to return the different result. It is just going to consider 5, 10 and plus 0. So it is just going to return 15 only. And that's what I have written, where result add 5, 10, it is just going to result as a 15. And if you are going to write the third argument, right, that is the optional argument over here, add 5, 10, 5. So this value is going to return me 20, right? So we are saved. We don't need to create overload method and do all those things, and different call also we don't want to make any changes over here, right? We just need to use these optional parameters, and whenever we required we can pass this optional argument. Otherwise we don't need to pass this optional argument at all. we are good to go. So that is the one major benefit we are having with the optional parameter and optional arguments, right? Number two, it simplifies the call of the complex method, indexer, constructor, and delegate. Now that brings me to end of my session. To sum up, in this video, we learned what optional arguments are in C Sharp, how and when to use it in a program. Finally, we discussed rule and benefits associated with it. That's all for this video, guys. If you like this video, hit the like button, share it with your friends and colleagues, subscribe to my channel if you haven't done already. Thanks for watching. See you next video.